Florence Waltz by Guido Deiro. First of all, it's really great to be back. I haven't played here for 14 years or 17, I forget, 2007 I think it was. And it's really an honor and also humbling for me to share the stage with such great performers. I mean, you guys really, I admire all of the performers. Like inspiration to me. But I want to thank Helmi for inviting me. Where's Helmi? Let's give her a Helmi. I think it's Helmi's day today. That's what I think. Anyway, so my program is on the lives and music of the two brothers, Guido and Pietro Deiro. They were like the two greatest piano accordionists of the early 20th century. And there was no one behind them. Charles Magnani didn't come until decades after they started popularizing the piano accordion. So they were the first stars of the piano accordion. And I'll talk a little bit about their lives and play some of their music. But before I do, someone asked me earlier today how I got interested in the music of Guido and Pietro Deiro. So Guido passed away 6 years before I was born, and Pietro passed away 4 years after Guido. But when I was a kid in New Jersey studying accordion, we had like so much sheet music by Pietro. I mean, he arranged thousands of pieces. He composed about 220 pieces in all sorts of styles. And his music was very, very popular. He was like the biggest accordion publisher in probably the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, up into the 70s, I'm guessing. Like that. So I played a lot of Pietro's music, and I heard about that he had a brother Guido, but nobody knew anything about Guido. Actually, Guido was the more famous of the two brothers, and he was the better performer back in the 1910s and 20s, like that. But he became forgotten as time passed. And I'll tell you more about that later too. But so then it was in about 19 years ago, I get a call from Alan Atlas at the City University of New York. He was organizing a recital symposium, and he wanted me to play some music by Pietro Deiro, Pietro Frosini, and Guido Deiro. And I said, yeah, I can play some stuff, but I've never played anything by Guido. He said, well, you have to. So I called up my friend Stanley Deiro, and he had some pieces of Guido. So I got them, and I played them at the recital in New York City. And after I was finished, this elderly gentleman, white-haired, came up to me, a little portly, wearing this gorgeous tuxedo with sashes and medals all over them. And he came up to me and he shook my hand like this, and he said, "Bravo, bravo! I have never heard in 50 years since my father passed away anyone play his music as well as you just did." Like this. And this was Guido's only son and heir, Count Roberto Guido Deiro. Before I forget, by the way, it's not Deiro, it's Deiro. If you want to pronounce his name, you got to say Deiro, okay? So many people, when I was a kid too, you hear Deiro, but it's actually Deiro. But anyway, so he said, "I'm so pleased by your playing. I want you to record the complete works of my father." He wrote about 50 original pieces, and I'll pay all the recording fees like that. So that project was finished in 2003. Then we worked together to build a website about his father, the great Guido Deiro. I edited his father's 50 compositions, and Melbay published that as a book with a biography. We got an Archaeophone, it's a record label that specializes in music of the early 78 recordings. They recorded a 4-album set of Guido playing himself on the records, and I wrote the liner notes for that. So it's really been a wonderful discovery for me, for someone that that has been forgotten for so long. But I will tell you more about that later. I should probably play another tune. I'm going to play something by Pietro. Pietro is also a great composer, all right? Known as the daddy of the accordion. And this is a novelty. In those days, what was popular? Marches, waltzes, polkas, tangos, novelty numbers like the one I'm going to play. This is called Quicksilver by Pietro Deiro. two brothers were born in northern Italy. Guido in 1886, Pietro in 1888. Their father, Count Roberto Deiro, was a very controlling man. And he forced his sons to work, as his grandson told me. The grandfather forced his two sons to work like serfs in the family's grocery stores. He owned several markets in towns and villages in Italy. And the family had, the eldest son, it's a hereditary title, the title of count. So they've had it in the family at least since the 15th century, when some Deiro did a big favor for the king or something, and they bestowed the title on him. So Guido inherited the title count from his father. But the two sons were really not into grocery stores. When Guido was 9 years old, his uncle gave him a little accordion, a button box. And he got pretty good at it. And he used to play the instrument standing outside his father's fruit stands to attract a crowd of customers like that. And Pietro also was 2 years behind his brother, of course, so Guido always did everything first, but Pietro admired his brother and followed in that. When Guido was about 17, his father tried to force him into an arranged marriage, probably for political purposes. And Guido ran away. He went up north to northern Italy, Switzerland, where he worked driving carts for the railroad. There was the first tunnel being built under the Alps mountains from Italy to Germany. But when he said, his father wouldn't let him take his accordion with him. All right, the father was really controlling, probably a real AH. But so Guido, when he saved up enough money from working on the tunnel, he purchased a button accordion, 3-row button, and he played it in a tavern in Metz, which is now Germany. And he got really good at it. And then he discovered, somehow he saw a piano accordion, which was just being invented around that time. I think 1880 is the first example that we know of around that time. But anyway, this was 1903. All right, he saw the piano accordion, he says, I want one of those. So he got one, and he discovered that, I mean, it's a chromatic instrument. You can play in all keys. You're not limited like the diatonic button box. And whether you're pulling in or going out, you can play the same pitch. So it was really superior. It had 120 basses, we believe, in the left hand. So in the meantime, Pietro worked as a mason also. He left home also a couple of years after Guido. And their uncle, Federico, had moved to the United States in the state of Washington, in a town called Clay Elum, where his uncle was working in the coal mines. So Pietro said, I'm not going to work here anymore. I'm going to go to America, the land of opportunity. So Pietro came over, and he also stayed with his uncle Federico and worked in the coal mines. So about a year later, Guido saves up enough money. He comes to the United States. And when he comes, he becomes a sensation. All right, playing the piano accordion, a vaudeville star, all right? And back in those days, I mean, people didn't have YouTube or Netflix. They didn't even have television. They didn't even have radio. There was no telephones. What did people do, for entertainment? They went to the theater downtown. And they watched the vaudeville shows, and there'd be musicians and dancers and actors and singers and jugglers and animal trainers, family entertainment, maybe a little theater too at the same time. And these shows, they moved from town to town on the train. And Guido was so popular, he was making so much money that he rented an entire train car for him and his lady friends and their cook and the porter and things when he traveled from place to place, because he was making so much money, $500 a week in 1910, let's say, which is a lot of money. Even today, I'd probably be happy if I could make that much money playing the accordion. And that's over 100 years later. But Guido, he was the star, and Guido taught Pietro, by the way, when they were in Seattle, Washington, how to play the piano accordion, because Pietro, he had a great amount of talent, but Guido showed him how to play. And then Pietro also joined the vaudeville circuit on a competing circuit, all right? They weren't going to both play. They very rarely played together. It's very interesting to read these reviews, newspaper reviews back in 1910, 1912. They all loved Pietro, but the reviewers said his brother Guido is better. Like that, you know. So we'll get more into this. I'm going to play some more music. I don't want to talk too much, but I think Pietro really developed a sibling rivalry. His whole life he tried to catch up to his brother, his older brother, and later you'll find out he finally did. And we'll get to that. Let me play another piece by Guido. This is Lido Tango. Both brothers really were gifted. They were, and they wrote beautiful melodies, beautiful tunes. They recorded their music, Guido, on beginning with Edison cylinders and continuing with Victor in 78 records. Pietro also recorded for Decca. Guido had about 70 sides, and Guido had over 100. Recorded between 1911 and 1935 or something like that. Guido actually, besides being the older brother, all right, people remember who was first. Everybody knows who the first president of the United States is, but not everyone remembers who was second. And you see the same thing in the newspapers about Guido and Pietro on the vaudeville circuit as they're traveling around. So Guido had both were great players. You listen to the recordings, okay, and you really can't tell, but I think Guido had a stage presence that Pietro did not have. Guido was really good looking too. Pietro wasn't like all that attractive, and wherever Guido went, he had a big problem of resisting temptation because women would just follow him to his hotel room, all right? And he had great difficulty in refusing their charms. Charms, I think, is the right word like that. But Pietro, on the other hand, he did get married. Bianca Vincenzi, I think was her name, and he was faithful wife. Guido had 4 wives. The second wife was Mae West, and she writes about him in her autobiography. Goodness had nothing to do with it, and she doesn't mention him. She doesn't spell out his name. She calls him Mr. D. All right, and we think the reason she didn't do that is because at the time she married Guido, she was still legally married to somebody else. And his name was Frank Wallace. She married him when she was 17, and she was just starting in vaudeville. And it was not till 1941 that they actually got divorced, her and Frank Wallace. By that time, she's a multi-millionaire actress. And he waited that long until she was famous before he sued her like that, for the divorce, and he got a big settlement on that. But Guido loved Mae, actually. Mae was really gorgeous, very talented. But she got pregnant. And he was down, I think soon after, he went to San Diego to play at the 1916 Panama Exposition, big World's Fair. And while she was up in Oregon, they had a summer camp at Brighton Bush Hot Springs. She found a country doctor to give her an abortion. And he didn't do a good job. And she got like this horrible infection. They had to take her to a hospital in San Francisco. She barely recovered, but they had to remove her entire uterus. So Guido wanted to raise a family, see, and now he could not do that with this woman that he really loved. So after that, they did split up. He did have 2 marriages after that. He had 1 offspring, a son. He was 53, the girl was 16 when she got pregnant. He was actually dating her mother. Anyway, so they got married, and the result of that was Count Roberto Guido, who's the man that met me at that recital. So Guido, I've never had that problem that Guido has. So maybe I'm fortunate, in that regard, But when you think about it, if you ever look at another person and say, "Oh, I wish I could be like them," you got to know that they have maybe more problems than you have. Really. I mean, I could talk about some problems, but I'm not going to right now. I'm tempted to, especially with this. See, I could have brought my accordion, but it would cost me bundles of bucks to ship it in the air freight, So I borrowed this other accordion. We'll have questions after, okay? Hey, what time is it? Oh my God, I've only got 10 minutes and I only played 3 songs? I better stop talking. All right, let's do, time for a Pietro song. All right, there's a good story behind this too. Whoops. Johnny Bailey, Beautiful Days, one of Pietro's biggest hits. His publishing company, I don't know if they made millions from it, but they made a lot. However, About 15, 20 years ago, I was talking to Mario Masti. He's an accordionist that lived in Jeanette, Pennsylvania. He's passed away now. He was in his 80s back then. His father was Joseph Masti. And you'll see him in old music published in the 1920s. He owned a publishing company in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. And whenever the vaudeville accordionists like Pietro and Guido and Frosini would come to town, he would pick them up at the train and take them to their hotel. Anyway, Mario told me that his father used to have Giorni Bailey in their catalog. And the composer's name was S. Falco. We don't know what his first name is. And at that time, in the 1920s, the US copyright law was founded, all right? And Pietro knew this was a big hit, so he put his name on it and sent it to the Copyright Office so that he is the legitimate author, and he had his lawyer send a letter to Joseph Masti, his company, and tell him, you must stop selling this because I'm the owner, I'm the copyright owner like this. And for 50, 60 years, we all thought that was actually written by Pietro, but he actually stole it because he was a good businessman and he was not above, if he could get away with it, he did it. In fact, some of his music says that he was the first to play the piano accordion in America. I have heard that some of the music actually says the inventor of the piano accordion. And this caused great distress to Guido, because Guido was the first to play the accordion. Guido taught his brother how to play it, all right? See, but back by the 1930s, Guido had lost all his money. Guido was very, very wealthy, of course, but he had all his money in the stock market. And when, in 1929, when the crash came, he lost all that. And he was very generous. He'd spend money on his women and friends and, renting railroad cars to travel. But the thing about, after the stock market crash, soon after came the talking movies. And when talking movies came out, people stopped going to see vaudeville. They could see their really gorgeous actors and handsome and activities and battles and you name it. It was like the movies were like really, really something. So the vaudeville shows went out of business. And Guido, he was a performer, all right. He needed to be on stage in front of thousands of adoring fans. When he lost this big source of income when the vaudeville theaters went out of business. He tried teaching. He did establish some accordion studios, but his heart wasn't into teaching. In fact, Mario Masti told me he visited Guido in Los Angeles in around 1947, 3 years before his death, and he had this tiny studio. He lived in the studio, all right? There was a little closet for a bathroom. He couldn't afford an apartment, all right? And he had about 10 students, Mario told me. And he said, where the other teachers in LA had 200 students, all right? Guido's heart just wasn't in teaching. He couldn't do it. But Pietro was very adaptable, all right? Pietro started a chain of music studios on the East Coast. He started this publishing business, and he would say whatever he wanted to sell his music and make big bucks, So Guido was upset about this, and Guido was living like a pauper in LA. So in the Accordion News magazine of 1935, there's a big discussion about this. Who was first is the title of the article. And the author is saying, well, everybody knows that Pietro was first, but is that true? Guido's saying not. And then the next issue, they had all these people writing letters who saw Guido in San Francisco, who saw him in Seattle. And when Pietro was still working as a coal miner, all right? So it was a big controversy. The two brothers finally made peace. I think it was around 1947, but Pietro was a millionaire or close to it, where Guido died pretty much penniless. All right, we only have time for one more song. I think it's actually time to stop. But I do want to mention, put in a commercial plug here that my recordings of Guido's music and Pietro's music are at that table back there. CDs, my books, the Melbe book with all of Guido's original compositions, printed music, a book of Pietro's polkas, Another book, a biography I wrote when I came here in 2005 about the two brothers Deiro. You may be interested. If you're interested in the history of the accordion in America, I recommend those two. I'm going to finish up with a piece that Guido popularized. He heard this in Germany in 1903. He tried to find the name, but he couldn't find a name. And he had never said that he wrote it, but it's attributed to him, and he called it Sharpshooter's March. It's allegedly the very first accordion piece that features a melody in the left hand.